The moment I realized that a careless joke could change the direction of an entire life was not loud or dramatic, but quiet and terrifying. Like the instant before a storm breaks. It happened on an ordinary evening, with the sky dimming over a small town in the United States, when loneliness had settled so deeply into my bones that I tried to laugh it away. I had no idea that one sentence spoken without thought would come back to me the very next morning, heavier than anything I had ever carried, asking me to choose between fear and grace. Before the story goes any further, take a second to breathe this moment in, and if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways love finds broken people, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can keep reaching hearts. My name is Nathan Carter, and at that point in my life I was doing my best to look like someone who had it together. I lived in a modest rental house on the edge of a quiet Midwestern town, the kind where everyone waves but no one really knows what's happening behind closed doors. I worked as a maintenance supervisor for a small school district, a job that paid the bills but didn't leave much room for dreams. Most evenings were spent alone, eating reheated food and listening to the creaks of a house that felt far too empty for a man in his late 30s. My marriage had ended 2 years earlier, not with shouting or betrayal, but with exhaustion, silence, and the slow realization that love had slipped away when neither of us was paying attention. That was where Grace Holloway entered my life, quietly and unexpectedly. She volunteered at the community center where I helped fix things on weekends for extra cash. She had kind eyes that carried sadness she didn't try to hide, and a smile that appeared carefully, as if she didn't want to startle anyone with it. Grace had moved back to town after caring for her mother through a long illness, only to lose her shortly after. She stayed because leaving felt like another kind of death, and because sometimes grief roots people in places they never planned to be. We became friends the way lonely people often do, slowly, cautiously, circling each other with humor and shared exhaustion. We talked about work, about the weather, about how strange it was to feel old and young at the same time. There was comfort in those conversations, and on one long evening after a fundraiser cleanup, the words slipped out of me. It was meant to be light, almost teasing, a way to laugh at how much time we were spending together. I suggested she could just move in with me and save herself the trouble of finding a decent place in town. I laughed right after, trying to make it clear it was nothing more than a joke, a harmless comment floating in the air. Grace smiled, but there was something unreadable in her expression, and then the moment passed. I went home thinking nothing of it, already embarrassed that I had let my loneliness show. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The house felt louder than usual, and my thoughts kept wandering back to how tired Grace had looked, how heavy her silence sometimes felt. The next morning, while I was standing in my kitchen staring at a sink full of dishes, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Grace asking if my offer from the night before was still good. The words sat there on the screen, simple and calm, but my chest tightened as if I'd been punched. Suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. It was real, and it carried weight and responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. I spent that entire day distracted, making mistakes at work, replaying every possible outcome in my head. I worried about gossip, about boundaries, about what it would mean to share my carefully guarded solitude with someone who was also fragile. I worried about hurting her if I changed my mind, and about losing myself if I said yes. Most of all, I worried because something deep inside me wanted to open the door I had kept locked for so long. Grace didn't ask out of desperation, at least not in the way people imagine. When we met later that week at a small park near the river, she explained her situation without drama. Her temporary housing was ending, her savings were thinning, and she was tired of starting over in places that didn't feel like home. She wasn't asking for rescue, she was asking for honesty. Saying yes didn't feel brave in the moment, it felt terrifying. But it also felt right in a quiet, steady way that I had learned not to ignore. We agreed on boundaries, on expectations, on the understanding that this was a shared chapter, not a lifetime promise. When Grace moved in with 2 suitcases and a box of memories, the house changed immediately. It wasn't louder or brighter, but warmer, like it had been waiting for footsteps other than mine. Living together was awkward at first. We bumped into each other in the kitchen, learned each other's routines, and navigated the unspoken rules of shared space. There were moments when I missed my silence, and moments when Grace retreated into herself, grief pulling her inward. But there were also evenings when we cooked together, mornings when laughter came easily, and long conversations that stretched late into the night, where we talked about loss, faith, and the strange mercy of timing. Slowly, without either of us naming it, something shifted. The house no longer felt like a shelter from the world, but a place where healing happened in small, ordinary ways. Grace started smiling more freely. I started sleeping better. We both started believing that maybe life wasn't done surprising us yet. The real test came months later, when Grace received an offer to move to another state for a job that aligned perfectly with her dreams. It was everything she had hoped for, and everything I feared. I knew what the right thing was, even though it scared me. Loving someone, I was learning, sometimes meant letting them go, even when it broke your heart. Grace struggled with the decision, torn between safety and possibility. I watched her pack and unpack the same box over and over, caught between staying and leaving. When she finally decided, it wasn't because I convinced her, but because she realized she didn't want to run from life anymore. On her last night in the house, we sat quietly, understanding that whatever happened next, we had already changed each other. She left the next morning, and the house felt empty again, but not hollow. It felt full of meaning. Weeks passed, then months. We stayed in touch, sharing updates and encouragement. Grace thrived in her new city, building a life that honored her past without being trapped by it. I learned to be alone without feeling abandoned, to trust that opening my heart hadn't been a mistake. Then, one autumn afternoon, Grace came back to visit. She looked stronger, lighter, and more certain of herself than I had ever seen. We walked through the same park by the river where everything had begun, and I realized that the joke I once made had never really been a joke at all. It had been an invitation, not just to share a house, but to share courage. If this story is touching something inside you, if it reminds you of a moment when kindness changed your path, or when a second chance made all the difference, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so these stories can keep finding their way to the people who need them most. Just before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below with the word hope if you believe that even careless moments can become miracles when met with honesty and love. Grace and I didn't end up with a fairy tale ending the way movies promise. What we found instead was something quieter and more powerful. We found healing, friendship, and the courage to say yes when life asked us hard questions. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with certainty. Sometimes it shows up disguised as a joke, waiting to see if you're brave enough to take it seriously.